Great, so welcome to the WSES Enterprise Summit. It's really pleased. We're coming to the end now. This is the penultimate day, because tomorrow we haven't actually got any webinars. We've got 3 on Friday.
Oh, wow.
I'm really pleased to have Paul Devoy, Chief Exec from Investors and People, joining us today, talking about why people matter. We're going to be delving into that sort of theme quite a lot today. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Delighted to be part of this webinar.
No, it's fantastic to have you. I really appreciate you taking the time to contribute to the summit. So Paul, before we get started, do you want to just introduce yourself, your role at Investors and People, and just tell us a little bit about what Investors and People do, for those people that don't know?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Paul Devoy. I've been the CEO of Investors and People for, it'll be 2 years in February. Prior to that, I led the organisation while it was part of government. We are now a community interest company, and I led the buyout of the organisation from being owned by the government to what's now a social enterprise. And maybe during this conversation I can tell you a little bit about that journey, because it was quite an unusual and interesting one.
Mm-hmm. So tell us, for those people, because we do also have like an international audience watching the summit and the webinars, tell us what kind of services Investors and People actually provides to industry.
So Investors and People has been around since 1991. And the reason it was set up is that the UK has a deficit in terms of its effectiveness at leadership and people management and people development relative to our competitors. So what Investors and People is trying to do is to get more employers to sign up to working to higher standards of leadership and people management. And if they meet our standards, they get our accreditation. So you could kind of say it's like an ISO 9000 for people management. I guess it's kind of one way of sort of simplifying the description of it.
Brilliant. And I know that you're a membership organisation, so tell us how many members you have and types of members that you have.
Yeah, so we've got 8,000 members. We've got about 500 international members as well. So they range massively. We have McDonald's, UK, we've got Sainsbury's, got Sony. So we've got large corporates. But 50% of our client base employ less than 50 people. Mm-hmm. So we've got a big element of our community that's small to medium-sized enterprises, and they come from the third sector and the private sector and some small public sector organisations too. So it's a very eclectic mix.
I find that quite... Oh, sorry, Ron.
No, I was going to say, and what we do is really simple. We have our standard about what good leadership and people management looks like. It's very well researched. We spend a lot of time and effort researching what are the drivers of excellence in people management. And then we convert that into a standard, and we measure organisations against that standard. There's no paperwork involved. All we do is go in, talk to the staff, get feedback from the staff, and we then evaluate the extent to which what they tell us matches up with what good looks like. And depending on what they say, we award a level of accreditation relative to the strength that the staff describe.
And is it just one standard that people are accredited sort of against? There's not different levels, or?
It is just now, but we are developing more standards. Now that we're outside of government, it's one of the great things about being a social enterprise. I don't have to ask for permission to do things now. So we're looking at developing a range of new standards at the moment. So we've been in discussions with the Department of Education for an accreditation around employers who offer good apprenticeships, high quality apprenticeships, and recognising those employers. We're launching a new health and wellbeing standard at the moment. There's a big issue at the moment, particularly around about mental health in the workplace. And we're also developing a free digital service for Investors and People, which is aimed primarily at small and micro businesses, and that'll be free and digital, and that's going to be called Jumpstart. So all of these services are all coming out next year. And in the last 2 years, since we've been a social enterprise, we've been investing heavily in these services so that we can start launching them next year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What I found really interesting about you saying there that 50% of your members are actually businesses that have less than 50 staff. I find that quite fascinating, that many businesses with such small numbers of employees actually want to, rank themselves against, huge international companies who kind of set their standards of employment and the way that they engage with staff and support staff at the same level as really big companies that you'd expect can actually invest that money into it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's an interesting paradox in there actually, because we got Lancaster Business School to do an evaluation of the different levels of accreditation. And what they actually found was it was easier for smaller companies to get higher levels of their accreditation than it was for large companies, which is kind of counterintuitive, because you would imagine that a bigger firm has got huge HR departments and organisational development consultants who can implement these types of practices, but actually the complexity of getting change and consistent application of values, etc., right across a large organisation is really, really difficult. And actually we find that small organisations can quite quickly progress up the levels of maturity in our standards. So one of the things I didn't mention earlier on is that there's different levels of maturity. So our standard's just not like a kind of one size. It basically measures you from developed level, and it's got 4 levels right up to high performing. So you can come at it at a very basic level and then progress up to higher levels, depending on how mature and embedded your people management practices are.
Yeah, and I suppose for small organisations, that not only is that change or things implementing new systems and processes and support programs, etc., is easier, but actually being part of a small organisation, you're more likely to know all your colleagues, you're more likely to have stronger relationships, whereas you can get lost in big companies, can't you?
Yeah,
you're very
absolutely
engaged.
You're able to get your arms around everything and affect change more quickly and more, and we're having higher levels of certainty that the change is actually being embedded. So just to give you a very personal example, when we left government, we basically left with the clothes we were standing in. We had no systems, we were no processes. The umbilical cord was cut the day we left. So we had to build all our HR systems, finance systems, everything from scratch from day one, while at the same time running a mature 25-year-old business. And we actually used the Investors in People framework to help us through that change management process. And we went from zero, like with nothing, to being accredited within 18 months. And we actually we had quite a few indicators leading up towards silver level accreditation. So if we could do that in 18 months, it shows you that by just following the framework and implementing it at a simple level, you can quite quickly make some significant changes.
Brilliant. So tell us about the story around you coming out of government as a sort of government-owned body into becoming an independent business organisation and a CIC. Yeah.
So I'll roll back a little bit before that, because that context is really quite important. So I started this job in August 2011. And to cut a long story short, Investors in People used to be an independent, what they call an NDPB, which is a non-departmental public body, or in Daily Mail language, a quango.
Yeah.
And it got closed down once austerity was starting to kick in, and it moved into the organisation which I worked. And we were basically given an objective to make the business operate without any government support. So essentially what we had to do was wean it off government grant funding in order that it could operate as a sustainable business. So we spent the first couple of years working on that, and how do we transition it from something that relied really heavily on government funding to not having any at all. So then if you fast forward to November 2015, the NDPB we were in, the government announced it was closing. And then they had to decide what they were going to do with us, because by that point we were financially self-sustaining. So they had a range of different options. One was they could sell it to the highest bidder, and there was quite a bit of interest in people wanting to buy it. But at the other end of the continuum, you had to keep it in the public sector. Now, I won't name the government departments involved, but I will say that they weren't all aligned in what their objectives were for its future. So basically what we had to do was to find an accommodation between some government departments that wanted to stay in the public sector and some government departments that wanted to sell it to the highest bidder, and find a way through that satisfied all of them. So what we did was we said to the ones who wanted us to stay in the public sector, look, these guys over here is never going to accept that. How about we make it a social enterprise? It's still not for profit. It's still got a social purpose. It's just not within the public sector. And then we said to the bits of government who wanted to sell it to the highest bidder, well, how about we buy the business off you if you allow us to pay it back over 5 years? that way you can tick your state aid and your value for money tests, and that way everyone's getting what they want. So I suppose when I say it like that, it makes me think it's a bit like a kind of Theresa May checkers kind of deal. It's a halfway house between the two things. But actually, in this context, it actually worked really well because it did meet the objectives of all the people involved. But it was I've massively simplified it there. There was lots of other things that went on in between. But over a period of 18 months, we managed to bring those two things together. And we felt that the right vehicle for it was a community interest company. We want to build a community of investors in people organisations who all believe that investing in people is not only the right thing to do, it's a smart thing to do. So a community interest company structure gave us the commercial freedoms to do that, but also made sure that our assets were locked and that any money we generated was reinvested in our mission to improve leadership, people management and organisations right across the UK and internationally as well.
Which really, shows the benefits of being a CIC there then, in terms of, being able to do
Absolutely. That. It gives you a really clear clarity of purpose and focus. And at the same time, it gives you the freedom to actually operate commercially, but commercially with a purpose in order to generate revenue that makes you more able to fulfill on your mission. And you just keep recycling the money to make you stronger.
Yeah.
So for me, it was, although it was a compromise between those positions, if I was to start with a blank sheet of paper, it maintains investors and people independence, it gives us commercial freedom, and it keeps us focused on our mission. So even though it was a compromise that actually got us to the solution that was the best for the organisation. It wasn't an ugly compromise.
No, definitely. And I know, like you were saying, that you were initially, when you were in government, obviously government funded. How did you manage that transition to becoming completely self-reliant and generating your own income? Like, because diversifying your income streams, and that's quite a shift for an organisation to go through. And it's quite common for many social enterprises that come out of the third sector as well.
Yeah, so we came at it from two ends. We really came down hard on our cost base, and we took out a lot of costs. So when Investors and People was an independent, not independent, you're not independent from NDPB, but when it was a sort of arm's length from government, it had about 60 staff. When we left government, we had about 15 staff. So we really pushed down hard on costs. The other thing that we did was we turned the business into a franchise model. So we had contracts with external partners who delivered the Investors and People accreditation on the ground, and they pay us a percentage of their turnover, which we reinvest in marketing, brand development, product development to make the proposition more attractive to the community, and then over time that should generate more revenue for us to invest more and to attract more people to the community. So basically we turned it into a franchise. We generated revenue from our franchise partners, and that meant we didn't have to take revenue from the government, and that paid for the 15 staff that we had, and we turned it into an ecosystem that was financially self-sustaining.
Fantastic. And so going back to kind of the core of what Investors in People is all about, why does it matter that businesses focus on their people?
Yeah. So I think there's two aspects of it. I'll come first of all from the aspect of the individual, because as a community interest company, we look at it through the lens of the individual, the organisation and society. So for the individual, what we do is we provide them with a signal of somewhere. And if you go and work for that organisation, you've got guarantees about certain things will happen. There's a focus on good leadership management. There's a focus on culture. There's a focus on people development, and that they've got a focus on continuous improvement, that they as an organisation want to improve and prosper. So in the second thing, as an employee, you also know that you will have an independent organisation, i.e. us, coming in and asking you for your opinion, and that opinion goes straight up to the board level, unfiltered by any executive layers in between, and that gets fed back to them in terms of what goes well in that organisation and what needs to improve, and that there's an action plan developed on the back of that that's consistently measured to see whether it's progressing in the right direction or not. So it gives you a signal about a good place to work, and it also gives you a voice in the workplace. where the management can be held to account to the extent to which your organisation's improving its practices. Then for the employer, what we do is we effectively are a catalyst for change. We help organisations work to higher standards of leadership and people management. We know through all the research that if you improve leadership, culture, people development, and have a focus on continuous improvement, you will improve the productivity of your business. All the research that's been done on the UK's productivity lag versus the G7 consistently comes back with the issue that it's down to poor leadership and people management. And then from the employer's point of view, from a branding, they get to associate their brand with ours, and they can then use that to help attract best talent out there. And also it does help with procurement because it's a recognised brand, and it's recognised and trusted brand, and it helps you when you're bidding for work. And then for society, if we can create more organisations who have high performance working practices, who create good, well-paid jobs because they're productive, and there's a direct link between productivity and wages, that then creates more people with more good jobs who've got more money to spend in the economy and makes the economy more prosperous. So we help create a more prosperous society. And that's why we've got an ambition to have a community of 100,000 organisations. We've got 8,000 at the moment, because unless we can get scale, we can't really have the level of impact that we want. Now, 100,000 is an enormous ambition, and we call it our moonshot. But I have my mindset is that, well, if we get to 80,000, it's still amazing. But if you have a mindset that you're going for 100, you'll think much more creatively and dynamically about the things you might need to do to get there. Whereas if you said 30, you'll be less creative and dynamic because it's not stretching an idea. It does put some people off because they say it's too big. I can't quite understand how we get there. And my view is that doesn't really matter just now. Just think about how you might. And by thinking about how you might come up with something that's quite transformational that will really help drive us towards it. I think the problem is with targets that people think, well, if I don't hit it, I'm going to get fired. That's not a growth mindset. That's a fixed mindset. A growth mindset thinks how exciting it could be to go on a journey where we might create an organisation that gets to that scale and can have that level of impact in society. Wouldn't that be amazing? I wonder what we could do to get there. Rather than, oh my God, I've missed my target. I'm going to get whacked by my boss. I'm going to be on a performance review. It's about reframing what it means. So it's not a target, it's a moonshot. We're trying to change something in a fundamental way.
I think that's a really important lesson for all businesses, but particularly social enterprises, to implement when they're sort of setting their big, ambitious goals or for impact. Like, what is it that you want? What does it look like if you reach your wildest dreams? Because sometimes, the day-to-day, you can get stuck in it, can't you? And you're not necessarily focused or creative or innovative or thinking transformatively about how you can do things differently, do things better.
Yeah.
But also stick to that purpose of why you actually exist as a business.
Yeah, because for us, unless we're making an impact, and unless we're doing something that transforms society, then the government should just have sold us to the highest bidder and somebody often make money at accrediting organisations. Unless there's a bigger purpose to it, that's what justifies us being a kick. And then if we're a kick, we have a responsibility to really, really make a difference. And that changes the focus of what it is that you're going after.
And presumably really motivates your team and those people that are working within the franchise with you as well. Yeah,
so when we did our own investors and people accreditation and review, one of the things that came out strongly was that we've now got just about 50 staff. So we went from 15 to 50 in just over a year. That's quite a challenging process in and of itself. And what attracted a lot of people to us was that they wanted to come and work for an organisation that had a purpose and was trying to make a difference, and whose objective wasn't just to make money. Yes, we need to make money, but we need to make money in order to drive our purpose. We're not making money just to distribute it to a group of stakeholders. And that's a very different way of thinking about what it is you're doing every day when you come into work.
And that's definitely one of the things we've explored throughout the summit, kind of, this real shift, and a lot of the research now shows this shift, particularly amongst millennials, because that seems to be the big focus of research at the moment, but
Yeah.
You know, wanting to not just go to work to earn a living, which is obviously important for most people, but actually that there's a bigger purpose to going to work.
Yeah.
And not only because we spend so much time there, but because people want to give back and contribute to society, the economy, and the environment in a much bigger way, and they see work as one way to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think the whole millennial thing's fascinating, actually, right? Because I think there's an awful lot made of that. But I turned 50 in August, right? I want to work for an organisation with purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. But when I grew up, when I left school in the 1980s, the only boom industry in the town where I was the Social Security office.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because there was so much unemployment, and that's where I started my working career. So you had much more of a focus on kind of like a hygiene factor, as I need to have a job.
Mm-hmm.
When there was high unemployment, there's virtually no unemployment now. I'm not saying there's not challenges for young people for a minute. I'm not saying that for a minute, but I think the kind of paradigm that millennials have a different set of motivations from everyone else, I think is overplayed somewhat.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that they are more confident at articulating it. Whereas when I started in work, I remember my first day in the civil service, I was the lowest level. I was an administrative assistant. I had a chair with no arms and very little cushion on it. The clerical officer, the level up from me, had a chair with slightly thicker padding, and he had arms on his chair. And then the supervisor had a bigger desk with a softer chair. The department manager had an office with a certain length of pile of carpet, and it went on and like that. And you were inside this very rigid hierarchy, and you had to call everybody Mr. and Mrs. And you didn't feel like you had the place to actually have a point of view. And I think one of the good things now is that people coming out in the workforce now do have a point of view and feel much more confident about communicating what they want than we ever did. And I think if you had asked us what we now ask millennials, I think it would have been pretty similar.
Yeah.
So I do think it's potentially overplayed a little bit, but I don't think I think if employers don't pay attention to it, then they're making a big mistake.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think because I'm sure most people in their employment want to be heard. They want to know that if they've got views and perspectives and opinions about how the business could be improved, that they're taken on board regardless of what level of within the business they are. And also, that makes good business sense. Like, why wouldn't you draw on the asset that you have within your people and all the amazing ideas?
Yeah. Organisations who have good leadership and management, a positive culture, support people to realise their potential and have a focus on continuous improvement outperform other organisations. All the research backs that up. But for some reason, it's not seen as being important in many organisations. So we've got 2.1 million accidental managers in the UK. That's people who have been put in management positions that have had no training for it. So if you want to become a nurse, you've got to have a degree now. If you want to become an engineer, you have to train for 7 years. But when you become the top nurse or the top engineer, they put you in charge of people. They don't train you how to do it. And somehow managing people's just something when you just pick that up, don't you? And as a result, there's all of these people out there floundering, not really sure what to do. And what we're now starting to realise is the impact of having managers who've not been trained properly has in the mental well-being of their workforce. We did a study earlier in the year, and 80% of the respondents said that they had experienced severe workplace stress, mostly due to bad management. And it makes us less productive. It has all the social implications of all the issues that we've got with mental health. Mental health is now a bigger issue than physical health, so which costs the country tens of billions of pounds a year. So there's a massive dividend if we get this stuff right.
And what does the kind of research, or in your experience, does it show that management is more about people having those people skills? I mean, can you learn some of that stuff in terms of becoming a manager, or is it something that's innately part of somebody if they've got the sort of the qualities, the innate abilities to kind of manage and support people?
Yeah. So I think every manager should be trained in the basics of coaching and learn how to coach people. So using things like the GROW model about how you set people goals, and you get people to work through all the different steps of that. There are some simple basic things that you can do that helps managers understand how to support the development of their people better. And just having a basic understanding of how the brain works.
Mm-hmm.
If you shout at someone, all the blood rushes to the fight or flight mechanism in their brain, and they're deciding whether to run, or fight. Mm-hmm. The brain doesn't rush to the bit of the brain where they become creative and think, well, how can we solve this problem together?
Yeah.
So all the old command and control paradigms that people fall back onto and managers fall back onto when they're under pressure, just do it, do this, do that, it's your fault. It's because people don't understand the impact of what they're saying and doing has on the other person. And if they understood more about the basics of that, they would understand what the other person experiences, mm-hmm. and then be more empathetic about, well, how might I handle this situation better to get the best out of that other person, and we can find a solution together. I think all of these basic skills and techniques should be a must-have for anybody going into a management position.
No, definitely. Really, really important skills to have. And like you said, so many people just find themselves in a management position because there's almost nowhere else for them to go in an organisation, or that's the next part of their development opportunity without that skill and support to do that.
I remember when it happened to me, I was 23 and I was put in charge of 8 people in a social security office in Glasgow, and I had no clue. I had absolutely no clue. You just think, well, if I'm nice to people, they'll be nice to me back. It just doesn't work like that,
Yeah.
Well, if I tell them what to do because I'm the boss, they'll do it. It doesn't work like that. You need to understand how you go about things. Mm-hmm. So, I imagine, well, the research shows there are millions of people out there at sea because they don't know what to do, and then they have a detrimental impact on them.
And also because different people operate differently, they need different support, different ways of communication, different. Some need that authority, don't they? Some others need kind of just the coaching.
Yeah, there's a great model that I'd recommend people to have a look at. It's called the Situational Leadership model. I don't know if you've heard about it. And basically, you manage people based on the situation. So if someone's new and inexperienced, they need high direction and high support. But if somebody's very experienced, they need virtually no direction and high support. And you manage people depending on where they are in terms of their point in their career or how long they've been in that role and how capable they are, and you manage them on the basis of their own individual circumstances. There's not like a one-size-fits-all approach. There's lots of different ways that you need to think it through.
Oh, we'll definitely put that link in the creating a resource for all the webinars, kind of all the things and the research that people have mentioned and stuff. So we'll definitely put that situational leadership model in there as well. Paul, in your experience of kind of social enterprises, do you see social enterprises being any better, worse, different in terms of how they manage and support their people? I mean, my initial response is that most social enterprises are socially minded. They're interested in, like you are interested in the impact of people, and therefore certainly are interested in basic things around living wage and having, recruiting people who are furthest from the employment market potentially, or investing money into training and apprenticeships and opportunities for growth. But are there other things that you notice?
Yeah, I would recommend there's an organisation called Engage for Success. I don't know if you've heard about it. And they're sort of part of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Development, which is a charity now. But there's a chap called Martin Dicker, who was the HR director at Prince's Trust, and he was an HR director at Fairtrade. And he did some research into what it's like working in charities. And one of the interesting things that came out of that is that sometimes charities aren't necessarily as good at people management as you might think they should be. And actually they get away with things because people are so committed to the purpose, they accept a lot of stuff around about that because they're so committed to the mission. Yeah. And therefore charities can sometimes get away with things that round about it are maybe not quite as good as they should be, because there's so much credit in the bank because people are so purpose driven. So I think it's hard to say that social enterprises or charities are any better or worse than private firms. But I think what they do have is higher levels of engagement because they're so mission driven. Yeah. And that gives you a great starting point. But then there's something incumbent upon you afterwards to leverage that to the maximum by having good practices on top, and not just getting away with less good practices because people will go the extra mile come what may.
Yeah. No, and I think that's been shown in recent examples, particularly in the charity sector, of, so there's an assumption that people that work in charities or in social enterprises as well, I'm sure, that, are all altruistic, and so everything that they do will be good. And actually we've seen, lots of evidence that that's, we have cross sections of society in all these businesses and organisations.
Exactly.
And there will always be bad behaviour.
Yeah, so I think it's wrong to make assumptions based on, the governance structure that you're within, whether it be charity or a kick or whatever. There still should be good governance, and I think that's another key thing for social enterprises, is having good governance where the boards of social enterprises look very carefully at how effective the leadership and people management is, and not just make an assumption that because it's an altruistic organisation there'll be altruistic leadership and management. The two things don't necessarily go together.
Yeah. So are there things like top tips that you would recommend social enterprises and social entrepreneurs leading social enterprises to think about if they haven't already thought about, like, a people strategy or their leadership and management structures?
Yeah, so if we start with the governance, I think it's really important that the trustees or people on the board pay attention to how effective the leadership and people management is in the organisation, and they have mechanisms through which they can get independent feedback. And then the other thing I would recommend is that the leadership teams really focus on, well, how effective are we as a management team? Are we a functional, high-performing team? Are we set in the right direction? Are we setting the right culture and values? Are we living those values? Are we supporting our people to be the best? What does it feel like to work here? How many people are suffering from Sunday night dread when they're watching Countryfile? Are we doing all the right things? And that should be a key part of their KPIs, and that they regularly monitor and review the extent to which they're fulfilling on that. It's very easy to just say, well, it's a people thing. It always comes last. We've got this thing to hit and that thing to hit. But unless you get the people thing right, the rest won't work.
Yeah.
Guarantee you that.
And I think that's really important, particularly for smaller social enterprises and any smaller businesses, that you might not have like a HR function in your business.
Yeah.
You may not have anybody that's responsible for looking after people, and so it usually does fall on the leaders or the board of directors to be thinking and setting strategy around that so that it can be implemented.
Yeah, and I'm not kidding anybody on. Managing people isn't easy. People are complicated creatures, and we're all very unique individuals, and getting the best out of each and every one of us is not. It takes a lot of skill and a lot of thought and a lot of energy. It is not easy, but if you get it right, the returns you can get on it are huge. And I think if you look at all the organisations that have succeeded for the long run, culture has been leadership and culture has been a key part of that success. And where it goes wrong, it can be catastrophic. So you've seen what's happened in some of the charities, you've seen what's happened in the banks. You can be sailing along thinking everything's going fine, and then the things that you've been hiding away under the carpet suddenly reveal themselves, and the whole thing can blow up. So it's something you've got to be constantly vigilant on and constantly working on to improve.
Well, no, and you saying that has actually sparked something to me, because it's not necessarily something we've talked a lot in the summit, or something that I think about necessarily, in terms of often social enterprises are either struggling, well, how are we going to generate income, what's our business model, and that side of things, or where we've got this clear purpose, how can we deliver more impact and reach our goals better? And I can see how businesses can lose sight of that key element, which is probably your biggest asset and your biggest opportunity to be able to fulfill both those gaps in terms of the financials and delivering your impact. If you're not supporting, managing, investing in your people, then you're not enabling your organisation to work.
Yeah, exactly. I think, and certainly my experience of sitting in management team meetings, discussions around objective, hard, numbery things, it's less emotive and it's quite factual, and people are more comfortable talking about that. But when you get into emotive stuff around about people and individuals and relationships between departments and culture and all of that, it's much more subjective, and it's much harder to get consensus on or get alignment on, and then people avoid it because it's difficult. But the reason it's difficult is because it's important, and if you get it right, it makes a massive change.
Absolutely. So I've just got one more question for you, Paul. Just ask, we've got a couple of people watching live. If you have got any questions, then now is the time to post those in the chat box so that we can actually ask all those. But we haven't had any questions yet. So the question that I'm asking all guests on the summit, Paul, is what really excites you or brings you hope about social enterprise sector for the future? That can be from your experience of being in charge of a social enterprise or more generally across the sector.
Yeah, for me, it's all about purpose, and people want to get out of bed in the morning and that know what they're doing or what they're working towards has meaning, and that is a huge motivation. And I think there's much more of awareness now that making money in and of itself is not very fulfilling. So I think it's a guy called Daniel Kahneman that done research that once you earn over, I think he said it was $60,000 a year, every pound that you earn after that, the amount of effort you have to make to get that extra dollar relative to the happiness and well-being it delivers is disproportionate, and it becomes a diminishing return. So working somewhere with a purpose and meaning actually is a more fulfilling environment in which to work. So I think it's going to attract more and more people and more talent into the sector. And I think for society as a whole, having organisations that are mission and purpose driven, who are actually looking at what's the social utility of what we do, how does it make everyone in our community's lives better, whatever that might be, then I think on that basis, social enterprises is going to become much more the norm going forward.
Yeah, no, I think that's really positive and also really optimistic, because actually some of the research in the sector, in the social enterprise sector as well, so there are skill gaps in terms of leadership and management. There are skill gaps in understanding social enterprises and their uniqueness within the marketplace and how they operate differently. So I think it's great to have an optimistic perspective that actually more and more people are looking for that purpose. So they might not yet have the right skill sets, but they're looking for the opportunities within your organisations as a social enterprise to kind of contribute in a different way as well.
Yeah, one of my favourite books is Drive by Dan Pink. I don't know if you've heard of that. People are looking for purpose, autonomy, and mastery. They want to do something that has meaning. They want to do something where they've got control over the work, because that's quite a big driver for motivation and well-being. And they want to do something that they're interested in and they want to get better at. And if those three things are in place, then generally people are motivated and engaged and happier at work. And I think social enterprises are ideally placed to offer all of those three things.
Definitely. And a really, really exciting sector, I think, to be part of, as we've explored throughout this summit. There's just so many different opportunities operating in all sorts of different industries as well. And I would highly encourage people who are watching this that aren't part of the sector so far is to look for those opportunities that are there. And there's going to be huge growth, hopefully, over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, brilliant.
Well, thanks so much, Paul, for your time.
Yeah, and I enjoyed the chat. It was really good.
Great, and hopefully speak to you again soon, and I'll share all those resources and books that you've recommended in the show notes.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Paul. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.